Okay, so we're on page Vav here, the left column, and we're up to the third paragraph up from the bottom of the left column, Harishonim Nechlaku. So what exactly is the case of what we call stiras poletis? Right, we had a question in the Gemara whether or not the status of poletis is that of tumas maga. It's as if she came in contact with Zera, with Shikva Zara, that has no implication as far as Hazayin Kiyim is concerned, or shall we say it's a tumas re'iyah, and therefore it's a stira to the Shiva Nikiyim. She'd have to start from scratch. Well, I shouldn't say that. That's not exactly precise, because although one half of what I said is precise, that if poletis is called ogas, then it has no relationship whatsoever to the minion of Zayin Nikiyim. But on the other side, to say that poletis is a tumas re'iyah, then we said it's only a stira to one day, to Yom Echad, which we wanted to tie together with what we call Shomeres Yom Keneged Yom, the Zova Ketam. Harishonim Nechlaku Bebir Safek HaGemon. Yesh HaSober Shestapka Kain Be'isha Sheba Oleha Hazav. Barei Poletis Hi Tzachsuche Ziva Haboim Min Hazav. Acha Isha Shepoletis Shikva Zora Eina Soteres L'Divrei HaKol. Avdas Shari Shlonim Sha'af Bepoletis Shikva Zora Istapka Gemora Im Soteres Minyon. This whole sugya of Safek in Niddah Daf Mem Beis is complicated according to the Rosh. The Rosh quotes Rabbeinu Tam. And Rabbeinu Tam learned that the entire Gemara about stira is only in a case of Ba'aleha Zav, which has something called Tzechsuche Ziva. So in other words, the Tumah here is identical with her Tumah. She has a Tumah Ziva, and that's why she requires Zayin Nikiyim. Only a Zava requires Zayin Nikiyim, not a Niddah. And a Zav is also the same identical Tumah. So therefore, Rabbeinu Tam reinterprets the whole sugya, and the only tzad to say that she has a kind of a Tumah Ziva here, like a Re'iyah, and therefore she's Soteres, that's only the case of Tzchuche Ziva, which means that there's some drops of Ziva here, and through the Bia, through that relationship that she had with the Zav, she is now, so to speak, coming in contact with Tumas Ziva. And that's why it's a stira. And according to Rabbeinu Tam, in a case of Shikva Zara, which is not Tomei B'Tuma Ziva, it's a separate Tuma unto itself, that would certainly be like a case where she came in contact with a sheretz or a dead body, a goof mace, and would not be a soteris. So that's the Rosh in the name of Rabbeinu Tam, and it sheds a whole nother light on this sugi about Poleta Shikva Zara. In footnote number Tzadi A, he claims that the Ramban, the Rashba, the Ritva all reject Rabbeinu Tam, as quoted by the Rosh, and even the Rosh himself, although he quotes Rabbeinu Tam, he himself dissents. So, for example, halacha, we're going to paskin that Poleta Shikva Zara is soteres, which according to Rabbeinu Tam would make no sense because the Gemara never even entertained such a possibility. The Gemara was only talking about a relationship between the Shikva Zera of a Zav, which has Tzechsuche Ziva, and therefore she's, so to speak, encountering a Tumas Zav, and therefore she's a soteres, but has no relation to Shikva Zara. But all the Rishonim reject that. When I say all the Rishonim, I just know the Rosh, the Ramban, the Ritva, the Rashba. I mean, that's a pretty impressive list unto itself. And they hold that the Gemara was vacillating about Shifas Zara, about Poleta Shifas Zara. And Poleta Shifas Zara is a stira. Okay, now he goes on. Yesh min harishonim shesober shelo omru poleta soteres el inyan tuvas hataros. Oh, this is the brisket sveinim that I said yesterday. Ach l'inyan isur lebaila eina soteres. So according to this shito, I think is it the right bit? Oh, this is the right. The Ravid has two dinim in Zava. One din is Isur L'Bayla. The other din is Tumas Zima. And the Ravid wants to say that the entire sugya about Poletes is only as far as Tumas Zima is concerned. In order for her to extricate herself and purify herself from Tumas Zima, she needs Zayin Nikiyim. So the Zayin Nikiyim within the context, or shall we say relative to Taros, to get her out of the state of Tumah, of Ziva, and into the state of Tara, she needs Zayin Nikiyim. Again, she needs Zayin Nikiyim L'Bayla as well, but only with regard to that dimension of Zayin Nikiyim that generates Tumah V'Tara, that Isur has to be removed, cannot be removed in the case of Poletes. Meaning, Poletes is going to upset and undermine Zayin Nikiyim as far as Tumah V'Tara is concerned. If she wants to leave her state of Tumah and enter into the state of Tara by counting Zayin Nikiyim, then Poletes is going to undermine the Zayin Nikiyim. But that has no relationship whatsoever with the Isur of Zava L'Bayla. Sharishon Cholkim Shigamli Isur, Linyan Isur L'Bayla, Soteres. Meaning, Pleitas Shikva Zora is Soteres. So, in a sense, this Ravid belongs to an introduction to Masechta Niddah. You can start Masechta Niddah with this Ravid, because the Ravid is telling you that there are two dinim in Niddah, and the same in Zava. There's an Isur din and there's a Tumah din, and they don't necessarily overlap. You can have situations with A without B. You can have a situation where she has a Tumas Niddah, but she doesn't have an Isur Niddah. And that would be the case of Poleta Shikva Zara, where according to Rabbeinu Tam, see, I'll give you another example. Right, the Gemara has a suffix in Niddah about whether Tvila needs Kavanah. What does that mean? Let's say a woman falls into a mikvah. She falls into a sea, S-E-A, right? So the question is whether that tefillah is olala. It could be that once again, using the Ravid's logic, you might differentiate between Tumah V'Tara and Isur L'Bayla. That when the Gemara thinks that she needs intention to set up a tefillah, that might be a separate halacha in Tumah V'Tara. As far as L'Bayla is concerned, she doesn't need intention at all. And there may be other naftamis. For let's say, for example, we said that B'nos Yisrael Echmir al Atzma, right? Rabbi Zera, that Afilu Ro Tipas Tam Kechad. That might be as far as the Isur L'Bayla is concerned. I don't know if that's true as far as Tumah V'Tara is concerned. That now we're going to burn taros based on the chumrah and the minig of B'nos Yisrael. You know what I mean by burning taros? Because if she comes in contact with taros, like truma and so forth, we have to burn them. Truma tzmei is ton streif. This could be a very fascinating opening to Masechta Niddah. Yesh min harishonim hasover shapoletes biyom shvi b'minyan yemei hasfira. Eina soteres sviros of yesh chol. Okay, now let's try to figure out why Yom HaShvi would be different. I mean, psychologically, you can understand it. I mean, she's on Yom HaShvi. She's about to complete Hazayin Nikiyim, after which she goes into mikvah and she's Muteris L'Bayla. And now she has a Poleta Shikmazor. So on a psychological level, I understand it. But on a conceptual, halachic level, I don't know why Yom HaShvi should be different than the other 6 days. Unless you're assuming that Poletis is only the Rabbanan, and maybe the Rabbanan are Mekil on Yom HaShvi. Even that's very different. Because the whole suffix in the Gemara, the way we interpret it, is on a Doraisa level.
I think that Poletis would take.
We're here in this paragraph, you say? How would you put that into the... We did have a discussion about Poletis before she went to mikvah. Yes? Where was that? Oh, wait a minute. No, that was before we got into Poletis. Again, I don't know if this is what you're referring to, but we had a discussion before the Tefillah. We spoke about Re'iyah below her kush. Oh, here it is. Ras Adam b'Yom HaShvi. Is that what you're referring to? That's the third paragraph here on the left column. Li'achar sheshlima sfira shiva nekiva dain lo tovo. So again, the Re'iyah was only on the 8th day. So is that going to be Soser, or that's a whole new Re'iyah of a Zavak of a Shomeres Yom? And one man, the Yom, wanted to say that that's a steer of all 7 days of Nikim. She has to start from scratch because she had this Re'iyah on the 8th day before Tvila. But I think now he's talking about a case of Poletis b'Yom HaShvi. Just wondering how that happened. Just a second. Poletis b'Yom HaShvi. Inyan Yemei Sfira. I'm just having trouble figuring out the Metzius here. Let this go. To know the Raisa, she made a B'dika on Yom HaShvi in the morning. Did we discuss the Doraisa level? I don't remember that we discussed that. I don't know. I think I have a feeling that we need a idea here that we don't have about Yom HaShvi. Oh, here it is. Here it is on page Zion. This last paragraph on page Vav, if I'm not mistaken, can only be understood if we read Daled, paragraph Daled, the first major paragraph on page Zion. Shigia Yom Shvi. Again, we'll have to backtrack a little bit. I just want to jump ahead. L'sfiras Yimei Shivas Nikiyim, he did Torah. Yochel Azava Litva. Okay, so let's underline that. This exact. I was going to say this, but then I was afraid I'd be saying total ignorance here. So again, I think we're dealing with a Doraisa, and on a Doraisa he writes me did Torah. On a Doraisa level, we don't have to wait until the end of Yom HaShvi. She makes a B'dika in the morning of Yom HaShvi, and she can go to the mikvah, and she becomes tahora. And that's based on Mixas Hayom Kekula. Oh, we have to see the drasha, but I'm just saying, before we get into the drasha, just the fundamental principle that on a Doraisa level, she can what? She can now go to the mikvah after she does a B'dika and a Hefsek Kara on Yom Shvi. It's in the morning of Yom HaShvi. Now we go back to our paragraph and we begin to understand how could she be a Poletes Yom HaShvi? And the answer is that she had Bia on Yom HaShvi. How could she have Bia on Yom HaShvi? It's on a Doraisa level, because once she made a B'dika in the morning of Yom HaShvi and she went to mikvah, she's Tahora on a Doraisa level. Again, I have to emphasize that. And now she has an intimacy with her husband. Now she becomes a Poletes on Yom HaShvi. And the Rosh writes, Eina Soteres. I think what he means is Eina Soteres is the logical conclusion that we have to derive from. Why? Because since we're saying no. It's not a totally logical conclusion. But anyway, let's at least begin to understand the Rosh. The Rosh is arguing that she finished her Zayin Akiyah. Again, that's not true. I went a little bit too far when I said that. But anyway, for pedagogical purposes, let's go with that. That's, I think, step by step, it'll make us more confident. She made a B'dika on Yom HaShvi. She now, Mitzvah Yom Kekula, counts the Yom HaShvi in totality as the completion of a Zayin Akiyah. She is now out of Zayin Akiyah. She goes to the mikvah, she has a relationship with her husband, and now she's a Poletes. You can't have a stira of Zayin Akiyah because she already completed Zayin Akiyah. That's what the Rosh is arguing. But now you're going to ask me, okay, so that was good for pedagogy purposes, but what I said has to be refined, has to be refurbished, because if she has a Riyas Dam, then for sure it's Soter. So if we're saying that Poletes is a Riyah, is a Tumas Riyah going to one side of the corner, that's why it's Soteres. So how could the Rosh say that even though she's Poletes, it's not a stira to Zayin Akiyah because she already finished her Zayin Akiyah this morning on Yom HaShvi, but that's not so, because if she has a Riyas down, then for sure it's Soteres and she starts from scratch. So I think the conclusion that we have to derive here is that even according to that side of the Gemara, that Poletes Shechva Zera is a stira, but it's a brand new category. You can call it a Tumas Re'iyah. It's like a Tumas Re'iyah, but it's not Re'iyah's Dam. Otherwise, this Rosh makes no sense. It's a Rosh without a cup. So apparently, even if I grant you that I classify Tumas Shechva Zora Poletes as a Tumas Re'iyah, and that's why it's Soteres, but it's not identical with Riyas Dam. It's a brand new category with its own, it dances to its own tune. Again, you'd have to figure out exactly how to define it. In other words, in that quasi-state of the last part of Yom Zion, after she made a Bedika and a Spiras Yom Shvi Shal Zion Akir, but it hasn't yet come to Shkia, and we're still on the seventh day, she's in that quasi-state, and then Afkamita is going to be the difference between Dam and Zera. From the perspective of Dam, she's still within the Zion. From the perspective of Shifazar, she's already outside and beyond the Zion. Again, a brisket thing. I mean, you see to what extent Niddah is conceptual. Like, I'll give it a break. Is she beyond Zion or is she not beyond Zion? How can you play it on two sides of the thing? You're telling me that relative to Dam and Arias Dam, she's still within Zion Akiyah. And if she sees Dam, then that's one of the reasons why the Rabbanan are not going to allow them to have an intimacy until the end of Yom Zion. There may be many reasons, but one of the reasons is because if Lu Yitzurah, after they have Tashmish, she sees Dam, then he had a beer with his Zava because now there's a steer to all the Zion Akiyah. I think, yeah, we'll see if I'm right, but that's. But let's go on to page Zion. Kosvu Rishonim. Shalom Askanis Tibri Agmara Repoletas Kiroa V'Soteres Yom Ech. Okay, that's the final conclusion. And again, I would assume it's a Doraisa until I know otherwise. Now we go over this paragraph that we started before. Tefillah Sova Ein Hazova Niteres Mitzvasel B'Tefillah B'Mikvah Kosher U'Mishigia Yom Shvi L'Sfiras Shiva Nakir Midin Tarichola Hazova Litvol already on the morning of Yom HaShvi Afal Gav Delo Shlima Yom HaShvi whenever we have a sphira, then there's a halach of mixayom kikula. And Yechola Hazava Litvo. I can't begin to overemphasize those three words. Yechola Hazava Litvo. The Tvila is meaningful because it's as if she's already counted the Sofayom of Yom Zion. She's already completed the Zion Akiyim, and therefore she can be Kovelis. In the footnote, he has an equation to Zav. And he quotes a Gemara here on Daf Pei Zayin. No, where is it? Samach Zayin. Darshu bo chacham min hamikra v'safra lo shivas yom yachat titar achar maisa titar. I know achar aspira. So when it says achar tfira, achar titar, it's going back to the beginning of the pasuk v'safra. And since this halacha misa yom kikula, already in the morning of Yom Shvi, she made up bedika, she counted the day, she's already after the maisa sfira, and therefore v'achar titar. She goes to the mikvah. However, Kasu Rishonim, I didn't know this was Rishonim, I thought this was in the Gemara. Shetiknu chacham shelo titbal azav b'yom hashvi ela b'leil shmini. And this he quotes in the name of Tosfos. He says, Af l'Rebbe Shimon shemuteres min haTorah shrei darish bo min hakos v'yachat titar mikol makom tiknu chacham shelo titbal. Does he tell you why? Right now, he hasn't revealed the secret as to why the Rabbanan made this takana. We suggest it because we're afraid that they have bia, and then she sees a riyah, and it's so teres. The Yesh Cholkim shebetakana hakiduma Lo osru tefillah. The dafka akana mucheres osru gam tefillah. Not sure what he means by osru gam tefillah. What's the word gam here? So for that, you'd have to look up the sugi. Apparently, the original takana included more than just tefillah. There were other issues. I think, if I'm not mistaken, again, we'd have to go through the sugya, Adaf Samach Zayin. I think he's referring to tefillah biyom. Does that ring any bell? On a Doraisa level, she can be tovelis biyom. The Rabbanan made a takana that we wait till Lila. In any event, according to this opinion, the Rabbanan created an Isa Tvila on Yom HaShvi, where the Torah would recognize and validate Tvila b'Yom HaShvi. And that's based on this drasha of the Safra law, such a Tita. Tavla b'Shvi. If I understand correctly, Tavla b'Shvi means she violated this takana, that in the takana mucheres, asru tvila. But she went ahead, took the law into her own hands, and she was tovelis b'Shvi. L'das Rabbi Shimon, harehi asur b'tashmish b'yom hashvi. So the Gemara quotes Rabbi Shimon, and he says that already she went to the mikvah, and on a deraisa level she could have relations with her husband, but the Rabbanan made a takana and they prohibited it. They prohibited it not only because they required her to delay her tefillah until the night of the Shmini, but they prohibited it even if she went ahead and she was tovelas b'Shvi. She cannot create new facts on the ground. However, nechlaku rishonim v'masur gamudas chachamim acholkim al Rabbi Shimon. Okay, now where is the das chachamim here? He says acholkim al Rabbi Shimon. Just 1 second. Let's go back to footnote Kuf Beis. After Asfir Shel Mikzasayo Titar. Okay, so why would the Chachamim reject that? Are they rejecting this? No, the Rabbanan of Mekil. In the Rabbanan of Mekil. Gimel. I don't understand. He's assuming that there are Rabbanan of Mekil against Reb Shimon. If she went ahead and she was tovelas b'Shmini, if she asur b'tashmish, even according to the Chacham, well, I guess I'm making vis-a-vis Rabbi Shimon. What kula could they have vis-a-vis Rabbi Shimon? Unfortunately, he doesn't explain himself. Oh, we've had this many times before. It's just a general akdama. He doesn't expect to, don't expect that he's going to go into all the nitty-gritty details. Havas karbanos. B'yom hashmini l'tarasa li'achar sheshilmu sholmu yemei sfiras dayinikim v'tavla b'leil shmini mevia karbana shtei torim o shnei b'nei yona echad li'ola v'echad l'chatas. So I would add the following. I hope I'm right on this, that we're talking about a zava, and we're talking about her ability to enter into the Beis HaMikdash or to eat kosher. And for that, she needs a kapara. She needs a carbon. He tells her what the carbon is. Okay, Rabbi, is that acceptable to you? That we can add a line over here that ad shalom mevia karbonosea, which is echad li'ola echad l'chatosh, they told Shnei b'nei Yona, he asura likanes l'migdash v'lechel kodshim shadayin tumasa Allah. And that's called a mechusa kapara. Have you ever heard that concept? Mechusa kapara. So a zava is a mechusar kapara, which means that until she brings her karbonos, there's still a vestige of tumah, which expresses itself in two isurim. One, bias migdosh, and number two, achilas kodesh. Okay, so this leads us to Yemei Ziva. Let's just make a note of where we got up to. Yemei Ziva. So this page sign we have, maybe if you get a chance, if you don't have paper, I think that it might still be paper. Just have to know where to find it. I think maybe it's on the.
There might be some back pages.
Yeah, that I have here. I should have a bunch of those.
Yeah, I'll find some. I have here too.
All right. Add this to the pile. The only thing is with this machine, you have to be a little sensitive. Flatten it out. Okay, let me just.